Welcome back to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV, and Bismarck can eat it. I mentioned prior that given the amount of time that I had to devote to various things, I simply wouldn't be tackling the extreme mode primals anymore. But I've actually found myself with more free time lately than I thought I had. And in turn, I've been able to devote myself a little more wholeheartedly to progression in Final Fantasy XIV, which means I'm finally able to tackle the extreme mode primals. Now, Bismarck Extreme I've actually had beaten for a fair amount of time now. Getting a recording for him, on the other hand, was trouble. Seeing as you don't especially get anything from him that's worthwhile, considering the Extreme Mode Primal directly after him, Ravana Extreme, grants an even better weapon, the only reason you would want the weapon from Bismarck is for glamour purposes. So hardly anybody ever farms it. You clear it and you move on to Ravana. Add to that, Fraps seems to hate Bismarck Extreme. I figured out how to record Final Fantasy now without any issues, but it still doesn't like Bismarck, which is why you'll notice this video is decidedly lower quality than many others. But we do with what we are in need of doing. Now, Bismarck Extreme is an interesting fight, and by interesting I mean it's a massive DPS check. That's your mechanic in the fight, to be honest. It's a massive DPS check. The fight in general is divided into 3 phases. The first phase of which is a DPS check, followed immediately by a much faster DPS check. The second phase is a DPS check, and the final phase is one very long DPS check with many smaller DPS checks along the way. So bring your deeps, 'cause we're gonna punch us a flying whale. Mechanically, Bismarck Extreme actually plays very similar to the hard mode of Bismarck, so if you've been through the story, you actually already know many of the mechanics for Bismarck Extreme. The predominant thing you have to worry about is the island's health. This serves as the soft enrage of the fight, I guess you could say, or to an extent, the hard enrage of the fight, which the island's health comes from when Bismarck rams the island, it injures the island. Similarly, the adds that we'll encounter can also attack the island, doing damage to it. If the island's health is depleted, you lose. With that, as the hard mode of Bismarck happened, he of course will begin the fight by rushing your island, simply flying straight in and smashing into it. This is unavoidable, you all will be stunned very briefly due to it, and there's nothing you can do to prevent the damage. However, immediately after that, adds spawn. 2 of them, in fact, both of which are the Vanu Vanu that are a little more aggressively supporting Bismarck. Now, as the battle with these adds goes on, eventually Bismarck will rush the island once again, smashing into it and dealing more damage to it, as well as stunning all of you. This is where, as you can see, the large C mark we have over the small Magitech field generator in the middle of the arena. One of the people in your group is going to be assigned to hit that. This will put up a field which will prevent damage to both the island and the stun against you. Now, while you're defeating these 2 adds, you of course have to worry about their own AoEs as well as the water drop AoEs coming down from the air. Having completed that, which is a small DPS check, because these 2 adds need to be defeated before you fire the dragon killers, or specifically before you hop onto Bismarck's back. Returning from the hard mode of this fight, there are 2 dragon killers on either side of the arena, which you will want to have people assigned to doing. Usually this is either ranged DPS or healers. These 2 dragon killers will not necessarily always be ready. You actually have to wait a fair amount of time before you can fire them. However, if you wait too long, Bismarck will target them with an AoE, damaging them and preventing them from being fired, and you've got to wait another rotation in order to take him down. So you can wait a little bit if need be, but those 2 adds should be down before the dragon killers are fired, rearing in Bismarck for the very first time. And thus begins our second DPS check. You can target a carapace on his back. This needs to be destroyed and broken in one go. If it cannot be destroyed in one go, your team simply does not have the DPS in order to win this fight. On top of making you go through that first phase again, which is just going to injure your island even more. There's not a lot going on in this phase otherwise, but it needs to be downed. You'll see Bismarck shake as he nears the end of his timer, because eventually he will break free. For this very first phase, stay on. There's no point in saving yourself from this, because if you can't destroy this, you've already lost. Save all your cooldowns, and pop them all right here. When the carapace is destroyed, Bismarck, of course, will shudder, knocking all of you back onto the island, and you will now ready yourselves for Phase 2. These rather large snake adds, the Sanua, will both spawn. There's a green one and a blue one. There are, of course, 2 tanks, so each tank needs to grab one of these and hold them on opposite sides of the arena. If these are held too close to each other, they gain a massive buff that will pretty much kill everyone. So now not only do these need to be killed, you'll notice a few AoEs going about, such as the tornadoes going through the air and the water drops that need to be avoided. And add to that, very briefly after the start of the battle, the Sanua will put a debuff on all players. It's either going to look like green wind or blue water. You need to pay very close attention to which debuff you have on you and attack the Sanua that is of the opposite color. If you have green and you attack green, it's just going to reflect the damage back. You can see I actually did get hit by that very briefly before I made my way over to the blue one. This debuff will last somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 seconds, but otherwise, this is another very large DPS check phase. Both of these 2 need to be killed in a little under 2 minutes, or you will wipe. That is effectively the big DPS check phase of the fight, though. Kill these as fast as you can, watch the debuff on you. When it goes down, they'll put another one on you. It may stay the same, and it may not. Or when one of these 2 is killed, the debuff will drop off of everyone, allowing you to all go attack the other Sanua. Note that when these change partway through, after 50 seconds, when it wears off and they recast the debuff, it may change even for the tanks. The tanks need to be very careful and tank the one as well with the opposite coloring of the debuff that they have. When the buff changes 50 seconds in, the tanks may find themselves attacking the wrong one, and there needs to be a tank swap at that point. This can be handled fairly easily, but it is very precise, as both tanks need to move simultaneously and grab the opposing Sanua as they make their way over. Done well, and you'll hardly notice the tanks swapped at all. Then back to simply DPSing down the 2. Once both adds are defeated, assuming you've made it in time, The tornado disappears, and Bismarck is ready for his major attack. If you've killed the 2 adds in time, it will not kill you. And that will then change the music and take us into Phase 3. Now, Phase 3, if you'll recall what I said earlier, is one massive DPS check with many smaller DPS checks along the way. This phase is actually very similar to the first phase. In that, a number of Vanu Vanu adds will spawn. These need to be killed before the Dragon Slayers are ready. Those are then fired, pulling in Bismarck, letting you attack Bismarck directly before you get shaken off, and then the adds respawn and you continue until the end of the fight. The difference here comes from a number of ways. For one, Bismarck has destroyed the Magitech field generator in the middle of the arena, so you can no longer prevent his attack from hitting you. This means the island will slowly be damaged more and more until you simply cannot survive and down goes the island. Add to that, there's an additional add, a much larger one, that is, if left alive for too long, will actually start attacking the island directly. I've heard many tales of people attacking the 2 smaller adds first, but personally, it seems like the highest priority to me to kill that large add first. These can be tanked in any number of ways. You can have one tank grab the big one, the other tank grab the 2 small ones. I believe what we're doing here is having one tank grab the big one and one of the small one, and the other tank simply solos their add, while all the DPS pile onto the 2 adds that the other tank has. Something else you'll notice is not only are the AoEs still hitting the arena as they were before, but there will occasionally be water bubbles about. The more of these are on the arena, the more AoEs you're going to be seeing, so these also need to be killed. So that's all kind of a continuous that you're going to be dealing with, and is the general flow of this phase. The final thing you're going to have to worry about is that Bismarck can control the weather. He does this once per rotation, but when you see the text appear on screen that says Bismarck seizes control of the clouds, be prepared for one of 3 different weather effects that's going to drastically change what you have to do in this phase. You're not actually told directly what each weather effect is. What you have to do is look at the clouds. If you see the clouds get purple, like they are here, that's going to be lightning weather. If you see lightning weather, do not kill any of the water bubbles. Simply focus down on the adds. Because very shortly in, 3 members of your party are going to be hit with a small lightning AoE. And then a brief time later, lightning again is going to strike, destroying all of the bubbles. If there are no bubbles, it's going to strike the players again. So really, it's best to take not only the bubbles off of our hands, but also not get hit. Once the Dragon Killers are ready, they will haul Bismarck in, where you'll see the Corona appear. Everybody dives onto his back and starts wailing on it to do as much damage as they can. However, you'll notice there is a very small debuff on your character, and this increases over time. The higher this debuff is, the more damage you're going to be taking over time. And if you get anywhere above about 3 stacks, you're probably just going to die. So stay on his back until you get up to 3 stacks, and then just get off. And pay attention to this debuff, because it's going to be sticking with you for a little while. Once you're off Bismarck's back, we simply repeat what happened before. The 3 adds respawn, tank them, and kill them exactly as you did prior. We're going to be repeating this until Bismarck is dead. You will note, however, that I only described one of the 3 weather effects. The other 2 are a wind effect and a water effect. Again, you simply need to look at the clouds to determine what's going to be happening next. You're looking for slightly bluish clouds, as they are right now, or a yellow-green color. Now, I made the terrible mistake of thinking that this was actually the yellow-green color, implying the wind effect, and not the water. What we see here with the weather effect we have is the water weather is going to be hitting us. What the water weather is effectively going to be doing is dropping very large AoEs right in the middle of the arena. So as long as you're not standing in the very middle of the arena, you're effectively safe. However, I thought this was going to be the wind weather. The wind weather actually starts with an AoE that hits starting from the center of the arena and pushes you back. If you're standing farther out, it will actually knock you out of the arena and you'll fall to your death. So you want to stack in the very center. After you're knocked back, immediately you will be hit by another AoE that hits everything in a donut around the middle. So once you get knocked back, run right back to the middle to dodge the second AoE. Now again, I made the mistake of thinking this was going to be the wind weather, so I just kind of stood here in the middle. Pretty sure I did get a vulnerability up debuff on me due to that, though. The ads may not be dead by the time the Dragon Killers are ready to be fired again. If they are dead, all the better. If they're not, the tanks need to stay on the island and kill the ads, while the DPS get on Bismarck's back. Recall that I said to pay attention to the one stacking debuff that you got on you from standing on Ravana's back prior, though, because it probably hasn't worn off. You may have some 10-odd seconds left on it by this point. Do not get on Bismarck's back. Wait for that debuff to go away, or the instant you stand on his back, that'll tick up to 4 and you will die right away. When you see Bismarck wiggle like that, that's his indication that you need to get the crap off his back. He's about to break free. And then once he's broken free, that's the end of our adventure. You've seen all the mechanics at this point. It's rinse repeat until Bismarck is dead. He's very close at this point. It's just a matter of finishing him off. Sadly, you don't get to see the wind weather, as we got the thunder weather twice, which I'll add is very good luck. And thus ends Bismarck Extreme. It's not necessarily a bad fight. It's not very mechanically complex at all, but it is a massive DPS check. And if you get somebody that's simply not geared for this fight, you're just not going to win. It's a much easier fight now that most people have better gear, but especially early on, it was very difficult to get a group of people that were geared enough to be able to do it. But that's Bismarck Extreme. Until next time, everyone.